Hello, everyone. Nick Harris here. I'm the tech analyst at Morgans Financial, and I'm very pleased to have with us here today Michael Reid, the CEO of Megaport.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So if you're not familiar with Megaport, it is a global leader in helping businesses connect their digital assets together, but it's also predominantly helping businesses connect to the cloud. So if you're technical, you'll know Megaport is a network as a service or NAS company. If you're not technical, in plain English, what that really means is they make it easy for businesses to connect to high-speed networks all around the world. Megaport is actually one of the largest providers or connections to the cloud around the world. They've actually got thousands of customers connecting to hundreds of cloud on-ramps all around Asia, North America, and Europe. It's also really significant because we're here today to talk about AI or artificial intelligence, and AI needs data that's stored in the cloud to be trained on. So Megaport is actually a lot like the universal remote, sitting in the middle between all those different sources of data and technology. Conveniently, last month, Megaport launched Megaport One, which is a product that helps customers connect and control complex infrastructure, including the cloud, and I think including AI. So consequently, Michael's really, really well placed to talk to us today about cloud computing and AI. So once again, Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If we kick off with the big questions, and then we'll delve into a little bit more detail. So in November last year, there was a bit of a wow moment with ChatGPT sort of taking the world by storm. I guess as I see it, it moved from being a marginally useful product to actually something that's pretty amazing and materially useful. In some cases, it can make or do things much better and much faster than humans. So maybe the first question, Michael, for a non-technical person, how could you describe generative AI?
How do you describe generative AI? I'd ask ChatGPT to answer that question. It's probably the easy way. There you go. So if you think about it, it's generating something. So that's the first piece. The AI component is, if you look at it, you talked about training models. If you put a whole heap of dog pictures together, put a photo of a dog and then put the categorization of what style of dog that was, i.e. what breed, and you fed that and trained the machine on it, you could then ask that machine to generate you either an image of a dog, or you could ask it to feed it an image and say, hey, what sort of dog is this? And it should actually give you that answer. And so whatever you're training these models on, that's the key. The training component gives you an ability to generate something. So if you look at the images that you generated before, you showed me some nice images of a rocket with my face, but wasn't my face.
Minor technicality.
Yes.
It was the AI, not me, I swear.
So if you think of, if you wanted to generate an image, as long as you've trained the platform on the images, a whole range of different images, you said rocket, is going to look at what it's been trained on and then try and piece the text together to deliver you an outcome. Same thing for whether it's coding or content. And I think, as you can see, the models are getting trained by more and more things, the more and more inputs. The internet as a whole is starting to go through these systems. So giving you an output, so generating something based upon the training that it's had.
Excellent. And obviously AI has been around for quite a long time. I actually did an undergraduate degree 20-something years ago in AI. Wasn't that useful back then? Why all the excitement now?
Yes, AI has been around for a long time. I think that it's become understood by the broader market and it's become accessible. So if you've got kids, they can access ChatGPT. I've got the app on my phone. You can feed it any information and start to get a response. So that's made it more mainstream instantly. In the back end, there's been a huge amount of computational models that have been running AI for a long period of time. If you feed it a lot of information, they'll be running some sort of output. What's changed, I think, a few pieces. One is ChatGPT has really made that accessible and the whole world sort of caught onto it. But the other piece is the processing power behind that. So if you look at the GPUs and if you look at NVIDIA and see sort of their share price and sort of the access to GPUs, these are the processing units that can actually compute all of the models that they need to push in and all the learning that it needs to be done. That is significantly sped up. So you can actually compute a significant amount more data than what you could, say, when you started your degree, for example.
So the technology's caught up and we can do a lot more in a lot shorter period of time.
The processing power in the GPUs has A, caught up, but B, it's made it available to the masses. And so I think the big difference for me, and even inside Megaport, you look at the use cases that AI can solve since ChatGPT and since all the other, by the way, there's a thousand other that have come with that. it's actually solving real world problems, or it's solving challenges inside the business, from coding, from content creation, as you well know. And even at its simplest form, I wouldn't say we're leveraging AI internally to its fullest. I don't think any company is yet. Everyone's trying to work out how to do that. But it's surprising to see how many simple functions that it can start to solve for already, just from everyday work.
And I guess that leads to the question. There's a thing called the Gartner hype curve.
Yes.
AI is pretty high up on the hype curve at the moment.
Yes.
As someone living and using some of this stuff, do you think it's hype or do you think it's reality?
No, I think it's real. I think there's just so many forms of how AI could play out. I think we're scratching the surface of how we leverage AI to deliver real world results for the business, in our case, a business. I think that's just the start of it. The hype bit is, yes, everyone's jumped on this bandwagon. It feels very .com-esque. I'd say that
Lots
sort
of
of
companies
feeling.
using AI for whatever.
AI is the word that you add to every single thing. At the end of every sentence is you've got AI. But I think I liken it to this sort of, I remember when crypto came and exploded into the market. I think there was a lot more hype associated with crypto, and we could never really fully understand the value that it would bring to society. And I think there was this perception that it was going to bring all this value, and I don't believe that it was fulfilled from a hype perspective. AI, I believe, is different. I believe that there is a tremendous amount of value for the species, but also for all of our businesses and every other walk of life. So I think we're just scratching the surface on that. Whether it's the hype curve, I think it just keeps growing in different ways you can leverage AI, some way, shape, or form. So it's early days, I think, is the appropriate statement.
And when any new technology comes out, people kind of get a bit nervous about jobs and employment. And, does this mean I'm going to have to find a new job? I guess there's two schools of thought. My school of thought is it's going to actually let people be a lot more creative and create a lot more value. But the other school of thought is that I'm just going to lose my job because the computers are going to do it. Got a view on that one?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. I'd say it's a minimal part of people losing their jobs, to be honest. But I think it will change the way we do jobs longer term. It doesn't mean you lose your job. I think that means that certain functions of your job can be replaced. But the answer and the output of that, no matter where, there's lots of examples of folks talking about when the calculator came in, did that change all the accountant's job? It's no longer needed. The reality of it is, if anything, it speeds everything up. So my answer would be everything's just going to get so much faster. And so instead of taking X time to do certain coding, you can actually reiterate platforms so much faster, bring out new code. Now, and as you know, every company is competing with another company. And so if they're moving faster, they need to move faster. So I don't believe it's fully going to replace individual roles, more so make those people faster. There is certain areas where it can replace editing content, as an example. There's a lot of content that gets created. So instead of spending the time to run through the perfect editing, all the grammar, all that, you can actually feed it. You still need someone to write the content in the first place, to feed the machine and then get the output. And so you're sort of iterating on that we've created, both visually and also from a text basis. We can actually feed that into some sort of either ChatGPT or something of the like to give us a much cleaner output of the content. The other piece is, if you look at a lot of the images you'll see me share, very, very quick images that I use on LinkedIn as a good example. Yep. And a lot of the imagery we've used to change Megaport's look and feel most recently. Obviously, I'm 5 months into the role. You'll start to see a bit of a different feel. We can produce those images extremely quickly because we can leverage AI to produce the imagery around it. Before, it would take weeks to get a particular image because you'd have a graphical designer basically building each component. Now, it hasn't replaced our graphical designer, but that means our graphical designer can turn around a creative image really quickly and edit that. Now, they still need to edit it. That's the piece that they're getting the feed, the input from, or the response from generative AI. Then they need to edit all the different layers and make it specific to whatever it is that we want to ask of it. So the speed at which you can turn these around is phenomenal.
I guess that leads quite nicely into a question about coding and Microsoft Copilot or Tutor, perhaps.
Yes.
Some of the stuff I've heard is it can make a coder 10 times better. What do you think about that?
I think if you look at Copilot, GitHub, GitLab, there's all, and everyone's going to bring something out. I think it's like that. Copilot's a good statement. It's sort of someone looking over your shoulder, supporting you to do that. I asked my team that. I said, like, how is this working? And the answer was, depending on the code, it can be incredibly helpful. Some code's not yet, I think that the value, I think they were still short on. But if you look at translating code, if you look at migrating code platforms, if you look at just a little bit like the content, that can do the heavy lift of producing a huge output. It still needs to be edited by someone that understands it and ensures that it's correct. But that component is, without a doubt, going to make a massive difference in terms of productivity for coders, for, as I said, content creators and writers, etc.
So I guess it sounds like you've got the option of, this is an exaggeration, but 10 times more output out of the same person, or do the same amount with a lot less people. But the reality will be somewhere in the middle, which is you want to create more content and make those people more efficient.
There is, I would say, specifically from a development standpoint, I wouldn't be looking to downsize at all. I would be looking to speed up what we deliver to our customers. So there's always a backlog of product and innovation and ideas that, particularly as a CEO, I sort of listen to our customers, come back and say, hey, when can we deliver that? My belief is that we will just be able to deliver that so much quicker to our customers, open up new product lines, open up new revenue opportunities. You don't reduce your team to do that. You either keep the team the same size or continue to invest, which is what you've seen from us at the moment, to deliver a much faster output to the customers. There is no shortage of product opportunities that we have in the pipeline. The only shortages we have is of time and energy that you can put into making those, the team that actually builds the product. So speeding that up is brilliant.
Building more in the same period of time, so more.
And if you think about it, you have to, because your competitors will end up in a similar space. You think of any platform globally, everyone's going to be in a similar situation, where it's a new race. You're just having to run faster in that race, but you've got tools to do that. So embracing those tools is critical. And if you don't, you'll run too slow and you'll miss it.
Get left behind.
Yeah. And I think every company around the planet right now is grappling with that. It's like the fear. So if you look at sort of macro, and I think you guys look at this a lot, you saw a lot of companies tighten their belt in the last sort of 1.5 years. This sort of constant talk of recession, and I think it was August last year where we saw a big turnaround globally, where all companies just at the same time started to reduce cost, reduced any expenditure that they could. What's really interesting is we're starting to see that trend reverse, specifically around AI. And the reason is because it's probably more out of fear. It's out of fear that they're going to be taken over by a competitor, because that competitor is going to leverage AI better than they are to overtake them. And so if they don't do that, what are they missing out on? So this sort of belt tightening has sort of turned into an investment opportunity. And I think every company right now is trying to work out what on earth that means. And they're very worried that their competitor gets the one up on them and they miss the boat on that particular piece. So that's why I think we've seen spend come back in that area. Just like in our space, just to give you some really interesting insights, we live inside 800 different data centers across the globe. So we spend a lot of time talking to data center providers. I've never heard of anything like what we've got going on right now, which is basically the things that you need to train the AI is GPU, and this is sort of these GPU compute farms. Now, you'd normally look at AWS, Azure, and GCP, et cetera, as that. There are a lot of new entrants coming to this space. Whoever's got access to GPUs and a model that they need to train, and all these startups that are flush with VC capital are throwing dollars around like you've never seen. All the data centers that we're seeing globally are fully subscribed. All their future data centers that they're like 2 to 3 to 4 years out, totally sold. They can't build data centers fast enough to get to the demand, which is why it feels a little .com-esque, I guess, if you think about that, that crazy demand bubble, crazy demand. I genuinely believe that they're going to need that demand. I actually don't think they can physically build it fast enough. And the reason they can't is because they can't get enough access to power. And so you might have the space and you could probably build quickly if you needed to, but you need to get access to power because these GPUs burn a huge amount of power.
I was actually saying, I reckon the best way to play this is through the data centers, because you need a data center, which takes 3 years before you can build the servers, before you can build the AI or the Copilot or whatever. So normally they're the lag, but in this instance, you need the infrastructure to get
you need the
racks and then
you need the platform. So you need the GPUs. You need the platform that can actually compute the models. And so kind of how I see this playing out. So first of all, you've got all the startups that are building this really quickly. You've got all the big players that are then starting to build these languages. What we'll start to see is enterprises that need to take their data and feed it into a model. And so that's where I think the next step of this is from an enterprise perspective. It's not about, hey, feed me some content, give me some images, give me some video, give me help me with coding. There's going to be, I have all this data. It's spread across Oracle and GCP and Azure and wherever it may be. I need to feed it to the GPU farm, whichever language you're running on it, and you need to train. So you want to train that model, and then you want to do something with that data. Like the output has to be that you're getting some benefit out of it. And this is the bit that sort of, I think we're early stages with, but the answer is it'll happen rapidly. And secondly, you've got to run it somewhere. And so that's why these data centers are cooking with gas. And that's why if you actually look at it from a Megaport perspective, we win in this game. You've got to go from one data center or one cloud provider or from somewhere to somewhere else. With just the traffic, so actually sending the data, and that has to run across some sort of connectivity, and that's where we step in. So being able to move connectivity from a AWS to Azure to GCP, or pulling it out into a CoreWeave or something like that, where they've got these big GPU farms, and training the model and then bringing it back, that's where Megaport is really beneficial in that space. So if you think of the gold rush, when there's the gold rush, you want to be selling the picks, pans, and shovels. And I think that's where we sit in this particular space.
So Megaport's leveraged its expertise in cloud connectivity, obviously to help businesses get to the cloud and now into generative AI. You launched Megaport One,
yes,
just recently. So can you just tell us a little bit about why a customer would use customer would use Megaport One?
Yes. So Megaport One gives you an ability to search globally for any GPUs that are available. And then you can actually provision and spin up a Kubernetes cluster inside that. So you can pick from a whole range of cloud providers, bare metal, and any partner that we start to integrate with, to basically deploy Kubernetes clusters. So the actual spinning up something on side of that compute. Now that compute can leverage the GPUs beneath that. And so you can search globally for GPUs that are available and then instantly deploy. And what's unique about Megaport is that you need to do two things. You need to spin up the compute, find it, that's novel. But the second piece is you need to stitch it together with some sort of network. And that's where you can stitch those two pieces of the puzzle together instantly. And if you chose to, swing them between different providers, depending upon, it might be cost related, might be access to GPUs. You could make a decision to actually move that. And it moves not only with the compute component, but all the network moves with you. So that's really, really unique.
So for example, I might want to spin up an AI and train it, but I can't get the GPUs in Brisbane, so I need to go to Melbourne where it's A, available, or B, cheaper. Or
yeah, and it might be in Melbourne, but you might then, yes, so let's say you spin it up in Melbourne, or it might be in Singapore or the US or wherever it may be. It's going to get hard to find these GPUs. But then what you've got to do is move the data that you need to it to train it from wherever that data sits. And so that's the piece where you need to go connect the network component, which is what Megaport provides you in its traditional form, and then spin up that compute, spin up that GPU farm, et cetera, whatever it is that you're delivering, and then send the data to it and train the model.
So do you think those big AI models will live in sort of around the existing data centers so they get close to the data so it's easier to process? Or do you think you end up with these big data centers in the middle of nowhere where land and power is cheap and you can use Megaport to shift data around to train it?
I don't think we know the answer. I think there's going to be a number of iterations depending upon what you need. If it's low latency that you need something closer to the edge. If you've got more time, it depends on how much data, the cost to actually train the models. I think the jury's out on exactly how this will play out. I'd say it'll be a bit of everything depending upon what they're trying to do with it. And I think that's the piece, is that there's so much possibility for what it brings, and we're only just sort of scratching the surface of use cases. And every time someone finds a new use case, we're surprised by the next thing that it creates. So I think watch this space. But back to the DCs, they're going to have to build a whole heap more GPU farms. The interesting thing about the data centers is it's also going to change how they have to build. If you look at the power, the density, and then if something's consuming power, it's creating heat. And there's huge amount of power that gets sucked by these GPUs, and then the heat output is unbelievable. So the density for both power and then and how they distribute or deal with the heat is opening up all these discussions around, you probably hear it, but liquid-cooled data centers and all sorts of interesting stuff that's going on.
Yeah, I've heard about some racks consuming something like 100 kilowatts, which is about 5 times what the average household uses. So that's a thing that's like half a square meter, I guess, in space. So it's a crazy amount of power.
And that's where the challenge is not necessarily getting access to land to build a data center, but access to power. And so that I think we'll see longer term, you'll see this push how we deliver power to if you look at in Vegas, they're building a whole range of solar farms all over the place. You can see it from space, actually. And so you need to think about how we can access power.
And Michael, you touched on businesses needing to bring data from a bunch of different locations and teach those clouds, bring data from the cloud into these AI models to train them, so lots of different sources. Do you think security is an issue, and are customers unwilling to put their data into a public cloud to train a public AI because I might lose my sensitive information?
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest challenges, and probably why most of the enterprises are a little slow to actually adopt, is it opens up a can of worms on IP law, on who owns that information. If it is created by AI, do you have the rights to use that? Who owns that? So there's a lot of, because it's so early, there's a lot of question around that. But if you're an enterprise, and Megaport thinks about that, the last thing we're going to do is put our source code into exactly. And ChatGPT, once you feed it publicly, it can leverage that to learn. I think what you'll see is more private enterprise-style private farms or private models that get built out to protect that. But that's sort of new. And so I'd say a lot of security functions, take a big bank, I doubt they're rushing to throw any customer-sensitive information into any of these models at the moment. So then what you probably sort of see is running your own private enterprise-style AI on-premise potentially, or you're leveraging a cloud provider to deliver that, but it's controlled in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's still super early, but evolving very rapidly.
And that's really a security kind of concern more than people worried that this AI is going to get super smart and take over the world, Terminator. And
I doubt that I think we're a long way away from anything like that occurring. But the immediate concern is, how do we protect our data? How do we protect our customers' data and sensitive information? So that is the security element to it. Plus, remember, if you train the model with, and I think there's been some examples publicly where some companies have sort of accidentally fed their entire source code into the likes of ChatGPT, which feeds the model. So I think
it just helps your competitors.
Well, to some extent, it goes to open source, and sort of if you look at a lot of companies that share their Twitter as an example, open sourcing their code and so forth. I mean, it sort of changes the dynamic of it. But there's so many companies that are so far away from that. But the data that you have an obligation to protect, which is your customers' data, and obviously what's critical for your company, your source code for Megaport, like all the automation platform that we've built, you can't have that pushed out publicly. So it needs to be controlled. And so you've got to take steps to try and do that, which is why I think a lot of companies are like dabbling with AI to produce things like imagery or content that's not sensitive, that might be external facing content in the first place, that you're using to help you write a blog or whatever it may be. It's very easy to use that, the image that you put together, and then the coding components without feeding it your entire source code.
Excellent. And I guess this is where Megaport looks really interesting for me, as sitting at the crossroads of that universal remote, whether it's a private cloud, a public cloud, a Amazon one, a Microsoft one. You guys sit right in the middle and can help businesses spin all those instances up, control them, turn them off, turn them on.
It's that flexibility to spin something up now in 60 seconds to any cloud provider, any GPU as a service, if you think of it from that perspective, across any data center anywhere in the world, and being able to do that in 60 seconds, burst huge pipes very rapidly, and then transfer a huge amount of data and then reduce that pipe down potentially. And you've got that flexibility to do that across all the cloud providers. But as you see more and more, I think what we'll see is more and more GPU as a service or GPU farms appear. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It's an interesting war that will sort of play out, because if you think of NVIDIA, they're one of the biggest providers. Well, they're
the number one.
They're the number one from the GPU perspective. But they're providing to cloud providers that are also going to produce their own chips to compete with NVIDIA. So it's a really interesting tug of war in terms of how they play that out. So if you're NVIDIA, I think you'd be wanting to distribute your supply across a range of different folks, as opposed to going to one particular cloud provider, creates their own chip and turns that off.
So Michael, just to end on a less technical note, we've talked a fair bit of detail about what can happen from a intelligence perspective, but AI has a heap of creativity too. Have you done anything interesting, quirky, creative with AI that you might want to share with us?
Personally,
Yes.
well, I think we've all written our wife a poem and then suggested that prior to everyone realizing what ChatGPT was and presenting that as your original work, I think, Ailey, you'll know which poem that was. For me, I think the ability to edit your own content. So if you're writing a long, complex email that you sort of want to bounce through, being able to throw that onto ChatGPT and actually get it into format, clean it, put appropriate grammar, all those pieces, I think that's creative for me, A. But B, if I look at the business and I go back to the creative piece when I look at the graphic designers inside the team, when I give them some crazy outlandish, and you'll see our images, a lot of them are space related. We have a rocket is our logo. And sort of when we go to Megaport Reach and we go to a new space, we're at a spaceship looking out across. I sent him like random images that I looked up on the web and said, oh, can you make something like this? And leveraging that, whatever he uses, AI to create it, it comes back with these beautiful images that you'll see us post out on LinkedIn and so forth. So I'd say that's me getting creative via the team, leveraging AI.
Perfect. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate the opportunity to hear from you. So thanks again.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for looking after us. Cheers.